Hey folks, welcome back to Whispers After Midnight, the place where we dive into the weirdest, darkest, and most unforgettable Reddit stories on the internet. If you enjoy the stories, hit like, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Let's get into it. It didn't start with anything strange. It started with something completely normal. Me building a PC. Not buying one already made, not getting some pre-built system, but actually putting it together myself, piece by piece, from nothing. That was the point of it. That was what made it matter to me. I had been working toward it for almost a year. After school, weekends, whenever I could get shifts, I was working at a grocery store not too far from where I live. It wasn't anything special. Most days were just stocking shelves, cleaning up aisles, pushing carts, doing whatever needed to be done because someone else didn't do it properly. The place always had this specific smell too, like cardboard that had been sitting in humidity for too long, mixed with something slightly sour from produce that wasn't quite fresh anymore. It wasn't fun work, but I didn't really care about that part, because every shift had a purpose behind it. I wasn't spending the money I was making. I wasn't wasting it on anything small or random. I was just stacking it, slowly, week by week, until I had enough to do what I actually wanted to do. And while I was doing that, I was planning everything in my head constantly. I wasn't just vaguely interested in building a PC. I had gone all in on it. I spent hours at night watching build videos, comparing benchmarks, reading through forum threads where people argued over parts like it actually mattered on a deeper level than it probably did. I'd switch components in my notes, then switch them back the next day, then convince myself I had made a mistake and redo the whole list again. At some point, it stopped feeling like research and started feeling like I already had the machine sitting in front of me. I just hadn't physically assembled it yet. I knew exactly what I wanted though. Case, motherboard, RAM, power supply, cooling setup. Everything was planned down to the smallest detail. I wasn't guessing anymore. I wasn't undecided. I just needed the money to catch up to the plan I had already built in my head. My parents didn't really understand why I cared so much about it. To them, it was just games, just something unnecessary to spend money on. But that wasn't really what it was about for me. It was the first thing I was actually building on my own, something that didn't already exist before I touched it. That mattered more than I could explain at the time. So when I finally had enough money saved, I didn't hesitate. I ordered everything at once. Everything except one thing, the SSD. That was the only part that didn't line up with the plan. I had picked a specific model early on, something reliable, something I had already researched and decided on. But right when I went to buy it was gone. Not low stock, not back-ordered, just gone everywhere I checked. Every site had it listed as unavailable, and the few places that still had it were charging way more than it had been just days before. At first I thought it was temporary, so I waited. I checked again the next day. Same thing. Then the day after that. Still gone. And the rest of my parts were already on the way. So I had a choice. Wait indefinitely or figure something else out. That's when I started looking in places I normally wouldn't. Smaller marketplaces, secondary seller platforms, random listings buried in search results that didn't feel as polished or trustworthy as the big sites I usually used. It felt a little off doing it, like stepping outside the normal path I had already set for myself. But I told myself it was just a part, nothing major, nothing that could really change anything. That's when I found it. The same SSD model, same specs, same storage. Exactly what I had planned for. Just cheaper. Not slightly cheaper. Noticeably cheaper. Enough that it didn't feel like a normal discount or sale. It felt like someone had just dropped the price for no reason at all. The listing itself was almost empty. There wasn't really a description. No detailed breakdown, no explanation of condition, no proper photos that looked like they had been taken in a real environment. Just a single line of text that said, used, wiped, fully functional. That was it. The seller profile didn't help either. There was no real history to look through, no consistent activity, nothing that gave me any kind of reassurance. Just a name that didn't stand out, and a set of reviews that all looked strangely similar. Same tone, same structure, like they were all written by the same person, trying to sound like different people. I remember sitting there for a while, just staring at it. Not because I didn't understand what it was, but because I did. It didn't feel right. But it also didn't feel risky in a way I could clearly explain. It just felt off. Like something about it didn't belong in the same category as everything else I had been buying. But I was also one part away from finishing everything I had been working toward for almost a year. Everything else was already on the way. And I kept telling myself it was just storage, just a drive, nothing important beyond that. So, I bought it. The rest of the parts arrived without issue over the next few days. Boxes started showing up at my house one by one, stacking up in my room as I left them unopened. I didn't want to rush the process. I wanted to do it all at once, sit down, and build everything in one clean session without stopping halfway through. The SSD didn't arrive with the others. That was the only part that felt slightly wrong at first. The tracking information updated once when it shipped, then went completely silent for almost 2 weeks. No movement, no updates, nothing. It was like it had just fallen out of the system entirely. Then suddenly, without warning, it showed as delivered. No explanation, no updates in between, just delivered. When I checked outside, it was there. A plain cardboard box sitting by the door. No branding, no markings beyond shipping details. Nothing that told me anything about where it actually came from or how it had been handled. Inside, it wasn't any better. There wasn't proper packaging. No foam, no protective casing, nothing that made it feel like it had been shipped with care. The SSD was just sitting there in a thin plastic sleeve, like it had been dropped into the box at the last second and sealed up. And the moment I picked it up, I could tell something was off about it. It didn't look new. There were small scratches across the surface, not deep enough to damage it, but enough that you notice immediately. The kind of wear that only comes from being handled before, maybe even used for a while. One corner looked slightly bent too, like it had been forced into a tight slot or pressed down too hard at some point. I flipped it over in my hand a few times, checking it more carefully than I probably needed to. Just trying to find something that made it feel normal again. There was a serial sticker on it, but even that didn't look right. It was worn down in places, like it had been rubbed or scraped over time. not something that should happen to a new product straight out of packaging. I remember thinking pretty clearly that I should just send it back and get a refund. But I didn't. Not because I thought it was fine, just because I wanted to finish the build. I had already waited long enough. The actual assembly didn't take very long, a few hours at most. But I didn't rush it. I already knew what I was doing from watching so many videos and planning it out ahead of time that most of it felt automatic. Still, I made sure everything was done properly. Components seated correctly, cables routed clean, nothing forced or loose. There's something about building a PC that makes it feel like everything has to be intentional. Every screw, every connection, every part of the process feels like it matters more than it probably does. I kept that in mind the whole time. By the end of it, when I finally stood the case upright on my desk, it didn't feel like I had just assembled parts. It felt like I had actually made something real, something that belonged to me. I plugged everything in, monitor, keyboard, power, and sat there for a moment before turning it on. Then I hit the button. It started instantly. No hesitation, no delay. Just power, fans, lights, everything coming to life exactly how it should. But even in that first moment, I remember noticing how immediate it all was. Like it hadn't been waiting for me to press anything at all. Like it had already been ready. I was expecting the usual startup process. BIOS, installation screens, setup menus, all the normal steps you get when you build something fresh. Instead, none of that happened. It skipped everything. No setup, no prompts. Just a login screen waiting there like the system had already been used before I ever turned it on. The login screen was already there when I got to it, like the system had been waiting for me instead of me turning it on for the first time. There was no setup process at all. No BIOS menu, no installation wizard. None of the things you normally expect when you build a fresh PC from scratch. It just skipped everything and dropped me straight into a finished system. The username was already filled in. M_LR. It was close enough to mine that it immediately made me pause. But wrong in a way that didn't feel accidental. Like someone had known my name but didn't fully understand it. Or maybe didn't care enough to get it exactly right. There was no password prompt, just the login sitting there, waiting. I clicked it. It opened instantly. The desktop looked normal at first glance, which almost made it worse. Nothing looked broken or corrupted or out of place in an obvious way. Just a standard background, a clean layout, the kind of thing you'd expect from a fresh install. But it wasn't fresh. You can tell when a system is new. Everything feels empty, untouched, like a blank room no one has lived in yet. This didn't feel like that at all. There were already folders on the desktop. Not many, but enough that they stood out immediately once you noticed them. Temp, logs, and one more that felt different from the others. sys_cache, all lowercase with an underscore in the middle. Like it had been created automatically by something that didn't care about readability. I didn't open anything right away. I just sat there staring at the screen, trying to find a normal explanation for it. Like maybe the SSD had been reused. Maybe it had been wiped improperly. Maybe it was just some leftover installation someone forgot to clean up. But even as I thought that, none of it felt right. The longer I looked at it, the more it felt like I wasn't supposed to be seeing it at all. Before doing anything else, I checked the storage. At first glance, everything looked mostly fine, just a standard single partition like you'd expect. But something about the numbers didn't line up. The available space was slightly off compared to what the drive should have had. Not by much. Just enough that I noticed it immediately. Like something was already there, taking up space, but not being shown in the normal way. Hidden, or intentionally hidden. That's when I moved the cursor over the sys_cache folder and just left it there for a moment without clicking it. I remember thinking I should just wipe the drive and start over. That was still the logical option. Whatever this was, it didn't belong here. And the safest thing to do would have been to erase everything and pretend none of it ever happened. But I didn't do it, because by then, it didn't feel like a mistake anymore. It felt deliberate, like the system wasn't broken, like it had been prepared. So I opened it. Inside was another folder, and inside that folder were video files. There were no thumbnails, no preview images, no normal file names that would give anything away at a glance. Just timestamps. Simple, plain timestamps that didn't explain anything, but still made it feel worse somehow. I clicked the first one without thinking too much about it. It opened instantly. No loading, no delay, just immediate playback. And the first thing I saw was my room, my desk. The exact setup I was sitting at in that moment. Same lighting, same angle, same clutter. Everything down to details I wouldn't expect someone else to get right if they were trying to fake it. For a second, my brain tried to find a normal explanation for it. Some kind of recording I had forgotten about. Some camera I didn't know was running. Some weird sync issue or corrupted file that just happened to show something familiar. But none of that held up once I actually looked at it properly. The angle was wrong. Not slightly wrong. Impossible wrong. There was nowhere in my room where a camera could physically be placed to capture that view. It wasn't hidden in a corner or disguised in something obvious. It was positioned higher than anything in the room could reach, looking down at me from a point that simply didn't exist. And it wasn't static. I was already moving in the video, sitting there at the desk just like I was in real life, doing the same small movements without thinking, adjusting my hand, shifting slightly, clicking through things on the screen. At first, it felt like a coincidence, like a recording with delay or some kind of playback mismatch. But then I realized something that made it harder to ignore. The timing wasn't off. It wasn't lagging behind me. It was slightly ahead. Just enough that it didn't feel like a replay anymore. It felt like anticipation, like it already knew what I was going to do. I watched it carefully, trying to force it into something normal, trying to convince myself it was just a trick of timing or some corrupted loop in the file. But every time I moved in real life, the video moved first, like it was always a half-second ahead of me. Not repeating, predicting. And then it happened again. In the video, I leaned forward toward the mouse. A moment later, I did the exact same thing without thinking about it. That was the first time it really sank in that I wasn't just looking at a video anymore. I was looking at something that was watching me back. And worse than that, it was already a step ahead of me. I kept staring at the screen longer than I should have. Not because I didn't understand what I was seeing anymore, but because my brain was trying to force it into something normal. Some kind of explanation that would make it just another glitch, just another corrupted file. Just something that didn't mean anything beyond bad hardware or a weird installation. But the problem was, it wasn't getting less clear the longer I looked at it. It was getting more consistent, more intentional. Because every small movement I made in real life was showing up in the video just slightly before I did it. Like the system wasn't reacting to me at all. It was already ahead of me, waiting for me to catch up. And that's when I stopped thinking about it, like a file on a drive. It didn't feel like something stored anymore. It felt active. Like something that was currently happening somewhere else and just reflecting it back to me. I remember leaning back in my chair just to test it, trying to see if I could break whatever pattern I was noticing. And in the video, I was already leaning back before I finished doing it. Not delayed, not mirrored, ahead. That's when it stopped feeling like coincidence entirely. I didn't touch anything for a while after that. I just sat there, staring at the folder list again, like maybe the answer would be sitting somewhere obvious if I looked at it long enough. Temp. Logs. sys_cache. The same 3 folders just sitting there like they belonged. Like they had always belonged. That's when something started to click in my head that I didn't want to fully accept. This wasn't random. This wasn't leftover data. Someone had put this here, on purpose. And then Asar came back into my mind. Not as a full explanation yet, not as something I was sure of, but as a connection I couldn't ignore anymore. R, a kid from school. Someone I hadn't really thought about in a long time, not directly anyway. But now suddenly it felt impossible not to. Because there was only one person I knew who had ever been even close to this kind of system behavior. R had been expelled for hacking school systems. Not small stuff either. Cameras, grades, internal networks. Things he was never supposed to have access to in the first place. At the time, it had just been a rumor that turned into a real incident. Then turned into something everyone stopped talking about once he disappeared from school. But I remembered enough. And worse than that, I remembered that I wasn't just a bystander in all of it. There had been history between us before everything went bad. Not friendship exactly anymore, not by the end. But there had been a point where we knew each other well enough that none of this felt completely disconnected. And that made it worse. Because now, it didn't feel like I had randomly found something strange. It felt like something that already knew me had found me again. I closed the folder for a second, just to reset my head. But even after I did, the feeling didn't go away. It followed. Like the system didn't need the file open to still feel present. That's when I heard my phone buzz. Not from inside the computer, from my actual phone. A message from my best friend. Short. You home? Wasn't unusual, but the timing felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. Like the moment I saw it, I already felt like I was being pulled out of something I wasn't finished with yet. I didn't answer right away. I just looked back at the screen again. That's when I decided I wasn't dealing with this alone. My best friend was the only person I trusted enough to even say anything to. No parents, no teachers, no police. Just him. He had a car too, which made things easier if I needed to move or check something physically. So I told him to come over, not explaining much over text, just enough to get him there. Because I needed someone else to see it. Not because I doubted what I was seeing, but because I didn't want to be the only one seeing it. When he arrived, he didn't take it seriously at first. He thought I had just installed something wrong or messed up the build somehow. Maybe corrupted files or leftover data from a reused drive. That was his first assumption. A mistake, not something intentional. But that changed the moment I showed him the video. He stood behind me while I played it again, watching the same thing I had seen earlier. And I could feel it immediately when his tone shifted. He didn't say anything for a few seconds, just watched. Then asked me to rewind it, then watched again. And that's when he stopped trying to explain it away. We started going through more files together after that. Not because we were comfortable with it, but because once you know something like that exists, it's almost impossible not to keep checking it. More videos were there than before, not random either. Patterns, different times of day, different situations. Me sleeping, me walking, me at school. Things I didn't remember being recorded, things I couldn't even place properly in time. And the worst part was that the timing still didn't make sense. Some of them felt slightly ahead. Like the system wasn't just watching anymore. It was predicting or replaying something that hadn't fully happened yet. That's when my friend said something that changed the direction of everything. He didn't sound confident when he said it. More like he didn't want to be right about it. But he said he recognized something. Not the videos, the behavior behind them. And more importantly, the name that kept coming back into his head, R. That was the first time it wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was starting to connect. Not fully, not cleanly, but enough that it stopped being just something wrong with the computer and started becoming something that felt like it had a person behind it, watching, waiting, and already knowing I was going to keep looking. By the time we got through everything together, it stopped feeling like we were just looking at corrupted files. It felt like we were being pulled into something that was already in motion long before we ever touched it. Because once you start seeing the pattern, you can't unsee it. And everything kept pointing back to one direction. Not a place yet. A person. R. At first it was just suspicion. A name that kept coming up in my friend's memory, like something he was trying not to fully believe. But the more we looked at the videos, the more it stopped feeling random. The structure behind it was too clean, too intentional. This wasn't someone just watching. This was someone organizing what they were watching. And my friend finally said it out loud. R wasn't just someone from school who got expelled. He was the only person we knew who had ever gotten close to systems like this. Cameras, networks, internal school systems, stuff he was never supposed to access but somehow did anyway, before everything blew up and he got removed from school entirely. And now it felt like none of that had actually stopped. It just moved somewhere else. That's when we stopped thinking about the videos and started thinking about the SSD itself. Because it wasn't just storing data. It was reacting. Every time we opened files, the system would spike. Not metaphorically, literally. The drive activity would jump in ways that didn't match normal behavior. Like it wasn't just being read from, like something on the other end was watching the access, waiting for it, responding to it. That's when we realized we weren't just looking at files anymore. We were interacting with something live, something connected. That became the plan. We needed a way to force it. Not just watch it, not just observe it, but make it reveal itself on our terms instead of its own, so we started testing it. Opening multiple files at once, rapid access patterns, anything that would force a reaction strong enough to show us where the signal was going. And it worked. The system responded harder the more we pushed it. Not crashing, not breaking, reacting. Like pressure was building somewhere on the other side. And then something changed. The behavior shifted from passive monitoring to active tracking. That's when we used the car, my friend's car. We left the house and started moving, not in a straight line, not following any pattern, just driving to break predictability. And still, it followed. The videos didn't stop. But now they started syncing differently. Radio interference in the car began glitching in ways that didn't make sense. Static patterns that almost matched movement on screen. Audio cutting in and out like something was trying to overlap what we were seeing with what we were hearing. Then a new video appeared, inside the car. On my friend's phone, it showed us, driving, from an angle that didn't exist outside the vehicle. That was the moment we both stopped talking. Because now it wasn't just watching from a distance anymore. It was inside the loop with us. The trace finally locked in after that. The signal wasn't bouncing anymore. It narrowed, focused. Like it had finally decided we had done enough to deserve an answer. It pulled us toward a location on the edge of the city. Old industrial area, abandoned structures, places people don't really go unless they have a reason to. And the closer we got, the heavier everything felt. Like the system wasn't just guiding us there, it was expecting us. We parked a short distance away and went on foot. The building was older than I expected. Not completely destroyed, but clearly unused. Windows dark, structure still intact enough to be operational if someone wanted it to be. And that was the worst part. It didn't feel abandoned. It felt maintained, like something was still running inside it. Inside, it didn't take long to find the setup. Monitors, equipment, cabling that wasn't standard at all. Multiple systems running off something that definitely wasn't meant for consumer use. And at the center of it was R. Not hiding. Not surprised. Just waiting. Like he already knew exactly when we were going to arrive. The confrontation didn't start loud. It started calm. Almost like he was explaining something he had been waiting a long time to say. He told us the system wasn't random. It was built on prediction, behavior mapping, pattern learning. Everything we thought was impossible video timing was just the system learning how I moved, how I reacted, how I made decisions. And the SSD wasn't an accident. It was placement, a trigger point, a way to bring me into the system without me ever realizing I had already been inside it. My friend tried to step forward first, but I stopped him. because I finally understood something. R didn't think he was guessing me. He thought he had already proven he could predict me. And that meant the only way out wasn't fighting the system the way it worked. It was breaking it completely. So I did something I hadn't done since this started. I stopped following the pattern. I did the one thing the system couldn't map. Something unpredictable. Something that didn't match anything I had done before. And for the first time, the system hesitated. That hesitation was enough. My friend used it. He had already called it in during the drive without telling me. Police were close, and while R tried to recover the system, trying to stabilize everything, it was already too late. We had given them everything, the setup, the hardware, the location, the proof, all of it. By the time officers arrived, R didn't try to run. He just stood there, like he understood it was over. The system was shut down on sight. Equipment seized, drives pulled, everything disconnected piece by piece until there was nothing left running. No more videos, no more prediction loop, no more system watching back. Later, everything was confirmed. Illegal surveillance, unauthorized data collection, full network reconstruction built around behavioral tracking. The SSD that started it all was wiped and destroyed as evidence. The system was shut down permanently, and this time, it stayed down.